All right. It says I'm live, so I'm going to presume that I'm live. Good morning, everybody. It is great to be here. We've got about 1 minute to go before we start our discussion about the four phases of flow. I'm super excited to be here at this turning of the year, right? It's a wonderful time. Our future is in front of us, as it always is. But this is a time when we're mindful of that fact and we try to capitalize on it, whether it's through goal setting, activities, vision exercises, life plan completion, or New Year's resolutions. So we've got about 15 seconds before we get started, and we are now at a quarter after the hour. I want to be mindful of your time. Thank you so very much for being here. I do appreciate it. I'm John R. Kormanik. I am the CEO and head coach at John R. Kormanik Coaching. I help people achieve their full potential and organize their lives so that they can show up in the world in the best way possible. They can achieve big things and big goals, and they can achieve small goals too. So very important. As I was saying, we're at the turning of the year. One of my intentions, one of my goals for 2023 is to be here the first Wednesday of every single month, providing value to you. So if you want to block out your time at 9:15 a.m. the first Wednesday of every month, I will be here live. If I'm not live, I will tell you it's a recording because something has interfered with me actually appearing live. But I can't imagine that that's going to happen because this is one of my top goals for the year is to be here with you live. Now, I will tell you, before I came on, I was doing all these activities, and I'm a one-person show here. There's nobody in the background or anybody else here helping me out. And so I can't figure out how to get into LinkedIn and pay attention to LinkedIn and pay attention to you and be engaged with you at the same time. And so feel free to post questions in the LinkedIn, right? Post messages in the LinkedIn. And after I wrap up our time together today at 20 of the hour, I will go back and I will answer all of the questions that are there. I am happy to do that. That's why I'm here. So let's get rolling. Today we're going to talk about flow. You've heard about flow from athletes, right? Athletes will talk about being in the zone. You may have experienced flow yourself if you participate in any athletic activities, right? Skiing, snowboarding, basketball, surfing, any athlete, running, the runner's high, any of those activities are flow state triggers, right? We can get into flow. And what that means is, for a basketball player, the basket seems so big you can't possibly miss. For a baseball player, you've heard them talk about the baseball appears like the size of a beach ball. They kind of get on a roll and they can hit the ball really well. You've heard Olympic athletes talking about it, track and field stars, all of those people. And the thing that's important to know is that flow is a neurochemical reaction. We're going to talk about that today. It's based on neuroscience, and it's repeatable in the workplace. So I'm going to share slides with you occasionally. When I do, I'm going to be shrunk down into the corner. And that's because as I tested, it's impossible. It's just not a very good look for me to be the same size as the slide. So let's go ahead and get started here. And there we go. So we're here to talk about the four phases of flow. As I said, flow is this neurological state where we are in the zone. We've all heard about it. Most of us have experienced it. Sometimes outside of work, sometimes inside of work. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So here's what we're going to cover. I always like to give you a roadmap, right? That's really important. You need clarity on what we're doing today. So the first thing we're going to do is define flow. Then the second thing we're going to do is talk about the characteristics of the flow state and why it's important to you as a professional to be able to achieve flow not only outside of work, but also in your work during your business hours. We're going to talk about that. And finally, we'll talk about the 4 phases of flow, the neurochemicals that are released, the brain waves that we know based on studies and fMRI studies, the brain waves that we experience during flow and the importance of those. And then we'll wrap up. So let's keep on going. First, though, a little bit about me. So, as you know, I'm John R. Kormanik. You're here on my LinkedIn feed. I practiced law for more than 24 years. I was a criminal defense lawyer. For the last 15 of those, I represented clients who were charged with everything from DUI to death penalty cases, right? Homicide, murder. I owned a law firm with, at first, 2 partners and then 1 partner for over 16 years. I have become a certified professional coach who is intimately familiar with the concepts of flow and who tries to work every day to improve my knowledge about that. I'm trained in the neuroscience of flow. I trained at the Flow Research Collective with Stephen Kotler. He's a well-known author. The Rise of Superman is one of his most famous books. And Stephen's a great guy. So that's a little bit about me. But now let's dive into what we're here to talk about today. So, flow. There's a lot of words on this slide. I highlighted the important ones, but let's take our time and we'll go through it. Flow is a state of peak performance in which the individual experiences complete engagement with the task at hand. It's a mental and physical state in which the individual is so involved in the activity that nothing else seems to matter. The flow state usually occurs when a person's body and mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. So let's come out of the screen share for a minute. Flow. It is a state of peak performance when we are in the zone. We are totally focused on the thing that we're doing. It is most often triggered by doing something difficult and worthwhile. So it's meaningful to us. We talk about the stretch and flow. I liken the stretch to a rubber band. If we stretch the rubber band too far, it snaps. So if something is so challenging that you can't possibly achieve it at the level that you want to, then chances are you're not going to drop into a flow state, okay? Because you're going to be in the struggle phase, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. If it's too easy for you, you're not going to drop into a flow state because it doesn't require your total attention. There's nothing there for you to have to engage your brain in such a way that you are fully engaged in the thing with and ignore distractions. So, too hard, you're going to stay in the struggle phase. Too easy, and you just won't drop into flow because you will likely be distracted by other things. That's flow. Put in the comments, put in the chat if you've ever experienced flow. Put it in there and maybe put the activity during which you experienced flow. It could be in work. You know, I experienced flow when I'm coaching clients. I experience flow when I'm creating content for clients. When I was a lawyer, I experienced flow oftentimes in the courtroom, standing in front of a jury. I could drop into a flow state. Briefing, writing briefs, nothing else mattered. Nothing else was on my mind during sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. So that is flow. Let's talk about the characteristics of flow. So here are the characteristics of flow. Number one, complete concentration on a limited field of information. You have blinders on. You are really paying attention to a limited field of information, limited things. It's not, distractions don't get you. Your focus narrows during a flow state. Merger of action and awareness. You are completely aware of what it is that you're doing. If it's out in the world, for example, when I snowboard, occasionally I will drop into flow. And my body is one with what is going on, right? That's kind of how it feels. Number three, notions of self vanish and doubts disappear. What this is all about is during a flow state, actually, your prefrontal cortex, the thing that creates fear and the long-term, consideration of long-term consequences, that happens in the prefrontal cortex. That gets shut off in a flow state. And that's why when you see these athletes, whether they're, a skateboarder jumping the Great Wall of China or Shaun White coming down the half pipe, his notion of self vanishes. It's not there. And his doubts disappear. You hear about this 100% commitment when people are doing those extreme sports. That's enabled because their prefrontal cortex turns off and they're able to execute and do things without a lot of fear. Time dilates. It either slows down or speeds up depending on the circumstances. So I've experienced this. I'm sure you have too. When you're involved in an activity, it could be anything. It could be a sporting event. It could be watching a sporting event. It could be in your business. It could be with your kids or with your spouse or with your friends, or you're doing an activity out in the community, volunteering somewhere, something like that. Time dilates, right? You look up and you're like, oh my gosh, how has 2 hours passed already? It felt like a minute. Have you ever experienced that? Couple hours pass and it's like, my goodness, that just felt like a minute. So time for you has dilated, right? Or when you're in something and time speeds up, it's like, oh my goodness, that only took 5 seconds, when in fact it took a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, right? Time dilates. It's different. And again, that has to do with our brain, the parts of the brain that are activated and quieted during a flow state, and the neurochemicals that are released. You experience a complete sense of control. I am in control here, even if you're not really. You experience it though. And autotelic experience is enhanced. You are completely aware of your body. You are aware of every single movement. You are paying attention to that. Now, you may be asking, yeah, John, that's great, right? That's great for out in the world. But how does that translate into my business? Well, I'm here to tell you. According to a McKinsey & Company study of 5,000, I believe it was 5,000, 500 or 5,000 executives in business, when they experienced the flow state, they were 5 times more productive. 5 times more productive. They were able to focus, really be in the zone with the work that they were doing, and they were 5 times more productive. What does that mean? They were 500% more productive. What took them 40 hours would take them less than 10. 500% more productive. Yeah, okay, John, so I'm more productive. What does that mean? Well, we all only have 168 hours in our week. That's all there is. There isn't any more. If you've interacted with me at any length, had conversations with me about all bunch of things. You probably have heard that. 168 hours. That's my touchstone. 168 hours. That's all there is. You can't make any more. And so, if you could be 500% more productive in the things that you did, how much of that 168 hours would be freed up for you, right? Sure, you're not getting into a flow state when you're sleeping. I get it. And y'all should be sleeping between 7 and 8 hours a night. The science backs that up. But during the day, during your business hours and during your non-business hours, if you were 500% more productive, how much of that pie, that 168-hour pie, could be freed up for you? That's why it's important. That's why flow is pretty dang awesome, if you ask me. 500% more productive. So let's talk about the phases of the flow experience. There are 4 phases in flow. The first is struggle. The second is release. The third is the actual flow state. And the fourth is recovery. You can't skip any of them. You can't skip the struggle. You can't skip the release. And you can't skip the recovery if you're going to consistently drop into flow. It's just not possible. These are the things that physicians and others tell us are necessary for a flow state based on fMRI, functional MRI studies, brainwave, EEGs, all of those things. Psychologists tell us, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi is the godfather, known as the godfather of flow. He's done research on it in the past. And so these are the 4 phases. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when you are in these phases. Then I'm going to have a little exercise for you to kind of round out our time together. So in struggle, science tells us that cortisol and norepinephrine are released. What is cortisol? Cortisol is the stress hormone. It activates our flight or fight reflex. That is cortisol. That's what is going on. Norepinephrine gives us the ability to bolt more quickly. Cortisol triggers the fight or flight reflex. That is what's going on in the struggle phase. And our brains, the wonderful machines that they are, the fantastic, almost unbelievable things that our brains can do, they haven't evolved all that much since we were living on the savannah. And so when cortisol is released, it triggers the fight or flight reaction. I need to do something real quick here. Quit. Okay. Triggers the fight or flight reaction. That's what happens. Then we have to step out of the struggle phase and go to release. Well, before we do that, in struggle, your brain waves are in the beta zone, beta range. So for release, nitric oxide is released. And what nitric oxide does, my understanding, again, I'm not a scientist, but based on my studies, nitric oxide kind of combats cortisol and norepinephrine, right? It kind of blocks them a little bit. And so we go into a release phase. And what happens to our brain waves is they switch from beta to alpha. Our brain waves actually change. When we drop into flow, the third phase of the flow experience, our brain releases dopamine, endorphins, and anandamide. So dopamine is the feel-good chemical. It has us reaching for goal achievement. Endorphins, we've heard about them, probably associated with runner's high when endorphins are released. They are also a feel-good neurochemical. And anandamide is another one, another feel-good chemical in our brain that helps our brain do different things. When we're in flow, our brain waves switch to theta and gamma. They really slow down quite a bit. It's quite remarkable if you do any research on Google Scholar and brainwaves and flow. It's quite remarkable how much our brainwaves slow down. And as I said, in flow, our prefrontal cortex, that governor on our behavior, gets turned off or diminished. And so we experience those characteristics of flow, the illusion of complete control, things like that. And finally, recovery. In recovery, serotonin and oxytocin are released. Now, you've heard about serotonin, I'm sure, right? It's the calming chemical. It calms us down. Our brains go into a delta brainwave pattern, and then you have the ability, if you go through all of these phases, to kind of wash, rinse, and repeat in the flow state. So if you recognize, okay, I'm in the struggle phase, I need to do something to get into the release phase. I need to step back, take a deep breath, go for a quick walk, take a shower, whatever it is. And then you release, and then you flow, and then you recover. Those are the phases the flow experience. And that's how we operate when we're in flow. So I've got an exercise for you as we wind down. Have you experienced flow before? If you want, you can get a pen and a piece of paper and answer these questions. Okay, I'm going to go through each one of the phases. So, for the struggle phase, think of a time when you were working on something important to you, right? It's got to have meaning. It was frustrating and difficult, and at some point, it just clicks. Something shifts, and all of a sudden, connections are made, and the work seems to become effortless. You have dropped into the flow state. So, at the end, you're left feeling elated and empowered because you've gotten it done. What did the struggle phase feel like? What are some worries that came up? What were the blocks that kept you from making progress? Think about that. For the release phase, again, it's the same thing, right? Struggling, working hard, things click. You really get things done. At the end, you're feeling elated and empowered because the work became effortless. In the moments leading up to that, I got this, the aha or insight or effortless breakthrough, what was happening? Did you take a break? Did you change your mental frame around something? Did you just lean back and welcome a new perspective? What did you do to be in the release phase, to move from struggle to release? Same thing. Now we're in the flow state, right? List 3 words that describe how you felt during the effortless action portion. How did you feel when you were in it, when you were in flow? So we've gone through struggle, we've gone through release, and now it's like, oh, I got this. Okay, I'm banging away on the keyboard, or I'm out there in the world, or I hit my stride on a run, whatever it is. List 3 words that describe how you felt. What were some of the connections that you made that you hadn't made before? Did you have a new perspective of the problem? Did you find creative solutions that weren't there earlier? Things kind of clicked in your brain, right? We hear that all the time. It just clicked. And finally, for release, we're at the end of that experience. As your action state started to wind down, right? You're coming out of flow. How did you feel? What did you do next in the recovery portion? What were your energy levels like? Were you drained? Were you stoked? Where were you? What kinds of activities did you feel compelled to engage in the recovery phase? By answering those questions, you'll be able to begin to understand how you experience the flow state. And the key is awareness. If you're aware, you can begin to build the muscle to achieve flow at will, at work, and be 500% more productive. 500%, 5x. You can 5x your productivity. What would you do? What would that mean for your 168-hour plate? I am a geek about flow. I love it. It's so important to me. So if you're curious, reach out. I'd love to have a conversation with you about the neuroscience of flow. It is so important. It is a tool that we can tap into over and over and over again to help us achieve our full potential and to have a life that is balanced, blended, and organized in the way that we want. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you received value. If you did, leave me a comment. If you didn't, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear how I can make these first Wednesdays of the month valuable to you. If you've got topics you'd like me to touch on, put them in the comments. Happy to explore. Thank you so much. Have an awesome day. Take care and be well.